Well, it looks like the coalition is planning big changes to the Human Rights Commission if it wins government. A report by Paul Kelly in The Australian today says Shadow Attorney General George Brandis wants to transform the national debate about human rights. He believes the Commission does not honour its charter and that it focuses too much on anti-discrimination rather than programs to promote freedom of expression and association. Now I'm going to have to ask you about this, Liz. What do you think about the idea of the Human Rights Commission promoting the idea of freedom of expression? Is it neglecting this now?
No, absolutely. I think it's a very important human right, just as Senator Brandis has said. In fact, it's absolutely fundamental to our democracy. And I mean, a great example of a fact that Australia does support it is the fact that the European Senator Wilders can actually come and give his speech. So, but what I'd say about the Commission is we work every day around these issues. Freedom of speech, one of the things we do is we're a vehicle for those people who are marginalised, who ordinarily would never have a voice in this country, to step up and have their say about things. And an example of that would be Susan Ryan, who's the Age Discrimination Commissioner. We've seen a rise of so many older Australians contacting the Commission, speaking out for the first time about issues that are affecting them. So I think the work we do every day supports freedom of speech, but we also support other rights, such as your right to live a life free from violence, and that's a major piece of work that I'm doing.
Tim, do you think this is something that we should be pursuing more, and do you think the average Australian is concerned about freedom of expression?
Well, I think they do when they see that the government tries to regulate it out of existence by making anything that's insulting or offensive essentially illegal, as they have under the exposure draft, the anti-discrimination laws. Senator Brandis is spot on about this. I mean, the Australian Human Rights Commission's submission into these proposed laws, they did not mention freedom of speech once, while all the Parliament, members of Parliament across the political aisle opposed these measures, and there were concerns raised out of the legal system. The Australian Human Rights Commission said nothing about them, even though they've now been overturned. This is a very serious issue and a massive absence of knowledge and judgment on behalf of the Commission.
Can I respond to that, Tim? We have 17,000 calls a year, of which 4 only relate to freedom of expression. The fact is, freedom of expression is well protected in this country, as it needs to continue to be, but freedom of expression does not come without limitation. There are various limitations.
That's true, but if you're right, there is a preservation on it, and when there was a giant tack on it, the Human Rights Commission was completely missing in action and needs to be held to account for that. How can they have not said anything in their submission when the rest of the country was going nuts about the protection of this basic human rights? And the reason is because human rights these days have been conflated well outside of their ambit of what is a human right, and the Australian Human Rights Commission is rightly, as Senator Brandis is pointing out, pursuing anti-discrimination as a very important measure at the expense of focusing on human rights. You're right, we've got the right measures. We need to protect them. The Human Rights Commission should be doing that.
Well, I reject that, because the Human Rights Commission is doing that.
But they stayed silent.
Well, when you say we stayed silent, we absolutely talked about freedom of expression, freedom of speech, but where the balancing is, because no right is absolute. It is about a balancing.
In your submission, you didn't mention it, and there was an explicit provision that made insulting or offensive language suddenly an illegal conduct, and the Australian Human Rights Commission had the opportunity, like so many other organisations out in the country, to comment on it and didn't.
Well, let me just bring Jess in quickly here. I mean, this is obviously a robust debate, and I was interested to see that Paul Kelly said that Tony Abbott and George Brandis have one thing, well, they have many things in common, one of which is their view that the Andrew Bolt ruling was something that made them sit up and take notice. Was there going to be an incursion on the freedom of the average Australians' right to talk about politics, for example? Do you see that as a landmark point, and do you think this is something people are concerned about?
I don't think so. I think if you spoke to someone on the street and said, do you feel like you don't have the right to say what you want to say, there's more outlets today to say whatever you want to say than ever before, and it's so, the cat is so out of the bag, you can't sort of really be held accountable for anything you say on Twitter or on the drum or on the radio. I don't think it's a problem that You
But you-
two can start again.
No,
That
but
was
you
good.
accept if those laws around insulting and
But
offensive
that's
language
why
hadn't
it was
been
an
introduced.
exposure draft.
That's
it was
right.
to see what the community felt, and the
That's right.
community's come back
And said no, but the Human Rights Commission didn't.
Well, in fact, no, we did. We talked
Well, not
about
in the
racial
submission.
vilification. Yes, we have. On numerous occasions, we talk about these things.
Not in
We're
the
out
submission.
there every day protecting that right. But I absolutely take Jessica's point that we would be one of the freest countries on the
Yes.
planet in which you can say what you want to say. And yesterday's granting of a visa to Wilders to come here and speak and put his opinion, even though it's an opinion that many won't agree with, just is one example of how free we are
It is,
around
and
that
it was
right.
under attack, and sadly the Human Rights Commission was missing in action. If anybody wants to go and read their submission, it's available at the Parliamentary Inquiry website.
Okay, well there's a robust debate to be had over the next few months and possibly the next few years. Now, independent schools are planning to end their confidentiality deal with the government over the Gonski funding negotiations.